During the Second World War, there was a planting trick so effective that families never weeded their gardens again. Not once a week, not once a month, not once a season, never. They planted vegetables in spring and harvested all summer without ever bending over to pull a single weed. Their neighbors spent hours every week on hands and knees, yanking unwanted plants from between vegetable rows. Victory garden families using this trick spent that time harvesting food instead. The method wasn't complicated, it wasn't expensive, it was free. World War II families discovered that weeds need three things to grow: light, bare soil, and disturbed ground. Eliminate any one of these, and weeds simply can't establish. Eliminate all three, and weeds become physically impossible. The trick eliminated all three simultaneously. Gardens that used it produced more food with less work than any method before or since. Families who learned it taught their neighbors. The knowledge spread through communities. For a brief moment after the war, Americans were about to abandon weeding forever. Then the herbicide industry found out. They couldn't sell weed killers to families who had no weeds. They couldn't profit from gardens that maintained themselves. They couldn't build a billion-dollar chemical industry on knowledge that made their products obsolete. So they buried it. They called the method old-fashioned. They marketed chemicals as modern and scientific. They convinced extension agents to stop teaching techniques that worked too well. They replaced free knowledge with expensive products and made sure your generation would spend hours weeding while their products sat in your garage. In this video, I'm showing you the exact World War II planting tricks that eliminated weeding forever. I'm explaining why they work, and I'm revealing why the herbicide industry has spent 70 years making sure UD never learned these methods existed. By the end, you'll never pull another weed again. If you're new to this channel, we uncover forgotten knowledge that powerful industries have spent decades trying to erase. The survival wisdom of our grandparents. The gardening secrets that built civilizations. Methods that work forever, not just until you run out of chemicals to buy. Subscribe now because this information is too important to miss. And share this video because the algorithm buries content like this. Now let me show you how to eliminate weeding forever. Number 1. The sheet mulching method. This was the foundation of weed-free World War II gardens. A technique so simple that children could do it, yet so effective that even the most aggressive weeds couldn't penetrate. The concept is straightforward. Weeds need light to germinate. Block the light, and weed seeds can't sprout. Sheet mulching blocks every ray of sunlight from reaching the soil surface. Families during the Second World War collected cardboard, newspaper, old carpet, burlap sacks, anything that could form a light-blocking layer. They spread these materials directly over existing weeds and grass. No digging required. No removal of existing vegetation. Just cover and smother. On top of the light-blocking layer went organic mulch, straw, leaves, grass clippings, wood chips, whatever was available for free. This mulch layer added insulation, retained moisture, and began building soil as it decomposed. To plant, families simply cut holes through the layers wherever they wanted vegetables. Seeds or transplants went into small pockets of compost placed in these holes. The plants grew up through the mulch, while weeds stayed trapped beneath the cardboard. One Victory Garden record from 1943 documented a family that sheet mulched their entire vegetable plot. They spent 4 hours in spring applying materials. They spent 0 hours weeding all summer. Their neighbors spent 15 to 20 hours weeding the same size garden over the same period. The weeds beneath the cardboard didn't just fail to grow, they died and decomposed, adding organic matter to the soil. The ground that had been compacted and weed-infested became loose and fertile. The smothering process improved soil while eliminating work. World War II families called it lasagna gardening because of the layers: cardboard, then leaves, then straw, then compost. Each layer contributed something. Together, they created weed-proof growing conditions that lasted the entire season. After the war, herbicide companies launched marketing campaigns. Why spend time laying cardboard when you could spray chemicals in minutes? They positioned poison as progress. They made smothering seem primitive compared to their modern solutions. Today, gardeners spray herbicides, then deal with chemical-resistant weeds, then spray stronger herbicides, then wonder why their soil is dead and their weeds keep returning. The cycle of dependency continues exactly as the herbicide companies designed. Number 2. The Ruth Stout Permanent Mulch. A woman named Ruth Stout revolutionized victory gardening with a method so lazy it seemed impossible. She stopped weeding, stopped digging, stopped cultivating. She just piled hay on everything and harvested more food than her neighbors, who worked 10 times harder. Ruth's method was simple, to the point of absurdity. Cover the entire garden with 8 to 12 inches of hay or straw. Leave it there permanently, plant through it, harvest through it, add more hay whenever the layer gets thin. World War II families who adopted her method discovered something remarkable. The permanent mulch layer created conditions where weeds simply couldn't exist. The hay blocked all light from reaching the soil surface. Weed seeds need light to germinate. No light means no germination. Seeds that fell on top of the hay couldn't reach soil to root. Seeds in the soil couldn't reach light to grow. The weeds were trapped in both directions. The decomposing hay also changed soil chemistry. As hay breaks down, it temporarily ties up nitrogen in the top soil layer. Most weed seeds are programmed to germinate in high nitrogen conditions. The nitrogen-poor surface layer told weed seeds that conditions weren't right for growth. They stayed dormant. Families during World War II who used Ruth's method reported spending less than 1 hour total on weed control per season. That single hour was spent pulling the rare weed that somehow found a gap in the mulch. Their gardens essentially maintained themselves. One World War II gardener described switching to Ruth Stout's method as getting his weekends back. He had spent entire Saturdays weeding before. After adopting permanent mulch, he spent Saturdays harvesting and relaxing. Same garden, same vegetables, zero weeding. The hay also retained moisture so effectively that watering needs dropped by 70% or more. It moderated soil temperature, keeping roots cool in summer, and insulated in fall. It fed earthworms that aerated soil and deposited castings. One material solved multiple problems simultaneously. After the war, the agricultural industry dismissed Ruth Stout as an eccentric old woman. They couldn't sell products to gardeners who only bought hay. They couldn't profit from methods that required no equipment, no chemicals, no annual purchases. Her revolution was quietly suppressed. Today, Ruth Stout's books are out of print. Her method is rarely taught. Most gardeners have never heard her name while spending hours every week doing work she proved was completely unnecessary. Number 3. The living mulch system. Some World War II families took weed elimination even further. They didn't just block weeds with dead material. They blocked weeds with living plants that served double duty. The concept is elegant. Weeds are simply plants growing where you don't want them. What if you planted something you did want in every space weeds might occupy? What if the ground cover you chose was useful instead of problematic? During the Second World War, families planted white clover between vegetable rows. The clover spread quickly, forming a dense mat that left no room for weeds. Any weed seed that germinated faced immediate competition from established clover. Most simply couldn't compete. But the clover did more than block weeds. It fixed nitrogen from the air and deposited it in the soil. Vegetable plants growing near clover showed darker green leaves and higher yields. The living mulch was actively fertilizing the garden while preventing weeds. World War II families also used creeping thyme between garden beds. The thyme spread across pathways and bed edges, eliminating the need to weed or maintain these areas. When stepped on, thyme released pleasant fragrance. Instead of tracking mud, functional ground cover replaced problematic bare soil. Some families planted sprawling vegetables as living mulch for upright vegetables. Squash vines spreading beneath corn stalks. Sweet potato vines covering ground between tomato cages. The food-producing plants did double duty as weed-suppressing ground cover. One victory garden from 1944 combined all 3 strategies: clover in pathways, thyme along edges, squash spreading beneath corn. The entire garden was covered with intentional plants. Weeds had literally nowhere to grow. After the war, herbicide companies needed bare soil to sell their products. They promoted clean cultivation that left ground exposed between rows. They taught that anything growing between vegetables was competition. They created the bare soil conditions that guaranteed weed problems. Today, organic farmers are rediscovering living mulches. They're proving that covered soil grows more food with less work than exposed soil ever could. Number 4. The dense planting strategy. World War II families discovered that spacing recommendations from seed companies guaranteed weed problems, The wide rows and generous spacing left enormous areas of bare soil where weeds could thrive. They developed a different approach. Plant so densely that vegetable leaves shade every inch of soil. Leave no bare ground for weeds to colonize. Let the vegetables themselves become the weed barrier. During the Second World War, families planted vegetables much closer than seed packets recommended. Lettuce went in 6 inches apart instead of 12. Carrots were seeded in blocks instead of rows. Beans climbed teepees with tomatoes instead of occupying separate areas. The dense canopy that formed shaded soil completely. Weed seeds need light to germinate. Under a thick layer of vegetable leaves, no light reached the ground. The vegetables created their own weed-free environment. The method required rethinking garden layout. Instead of long rows with walking paths between them, World War II families created intensive beds just 4 feet wide. They could reach the center from either side without stepping on soil. Every inch of bed space grew food instead of walkways. World War II, Extension Agent calculated that dense planting increased food production by 300% while reducing weeding by 90%. More food from less space with less work. The numbers made traditional row gardening seem absurd. Families during World War II also practiced succession planting that maintained constant coverage. When one crop was harvested, another was immediately transplanted into its place. The soil was never left bare long enough for weeds to establish. One Victory Garden record from 1943 documented a family growing all their vegetables in just 200 square feet using dense planting. Their neighbor, with a traditional row garden, needed 600 square feet to grow less food and spent triple the time weeding. After the war, equipment manufacturers needed wide rows for tractors and tillers. Seed companies benefited from spacing that required more seed purchases. The dense planting methods that worked for home gardens didn't suit commercial interests. Traditional spacing was promoted despite being inferior for small-scale production. Today, square-foot gardening and intensive methods are reintroducing what World War II families knew. Dense planting works better than everything the industry promoted in its place. Number 5. The chop and drop technique. When World War II families finished harvesting a crop, they did something that horrified conventional gardeners. They left the plant residue exactly where it fell. The method was called chop and drop. When a plant finished producing, families chopped it at soil level and dropped the foliage right there. No removal, no composting somewhere else. Just chop, drop, and plant the next crop through the debris. This seemingly lazy practice eliminated weeds through multiple mechanisms. The dropped foliage formed a mulch layer that blocked light from reaching soil. Weed seeds beneath the debris couldn't germinate without light. The vegetable waste did exactly what purchased mulch would do, but for free. The decomposing plant material also changed soil biology. Fungi that colonized the debris spread networks that occupied ecological niches weeds needed. Bacteria that multiplied to break down plant matter outcompeted microorganisms that supported weed germination. The soil became inhospitable to weeds. Families during the Second World War noticed that gardens using chop and drop had fewer weeds each successive year. The method was cumulative. Each season of dropping organic matter increased the weed-suppressing effect. World War II families also chopped weeds before they went to seed and dropped them as mulch. The plants they didn't want became material that prevented more plants they didn't want. Weeds defeated themselves. One garden diary from 1944 described the progression. First year, moderate weeding required. Second year, minimal weeding. Third year, almost no weeds at all. By year 4, the gardener wrote that she had forgotten what weeding felt like. The dropped organic matter also eliminated the need for fertilizer. As debris decomposed, it released nutrients directly into the soil. The garden fed itself using its own waste. No purchases required, no external inputs needed. After the war, the fertilizer and mulch industries needed gardeners to remove plant debris. They taught clean garden practices that stripped organic matter and required purchased replacements. They made chop and drop seem messy and unprofessional. Today, permaculture farmers use chop and drop on thousands of acres. They're building soil and eliminating weeds, while conventional farmers buy mulch and herbicides. Number 6. The No-Till Foundation. Every World War II weeding elimination technique shared one principle that modern gardening violates constantly: don't disturb the soil. Tilling brings buried weed seeds to the surface, where light triggers germination. A single pass with a tiller can awaken millions of seeds that would have stayed dormant underground forever. The very act meant to prepare soil for planting guarantees weed problems. Families during the Second World War who eliminated weeding stopped tilling completely. They built soil from the top down instead of churning it from the bottom up. They added organic matter to the surface and let worms and biology incorporate it. No-till gardens develop a surface crust that weed seeds can't penetrate. Fungal networks create a web that holds soil together and blocks germination. Undisturbed soil develops structure that favors crops over weeds. The less you disturb, the fewer weeds you fight. World War II families planted into permanent beds that were never tilled after initial establishment. They added compost and mulch to the surface. They let biological processes do what machinery couldn't. After 2 or 3 years, weeding became a distant memory. One Second World War gardener documented 10 years of no-till practice. By year 5, he spent less than 2 hours total on weed control per season. By year 10, he described his garden as essentially staining. The soil had developed complete resistance to weed establishment. The undisturbed soil also held water better, required less irrigation, and produced higher yields. Every measure of garden success improved when tilling stopped. The method wasn't just about weed elimination, it was about everything working better. After the war, equipment manufacturers needed gardeners to buy tillers. They promoted tilling as essential garden preparation. They convinced generations that churning soil was necessary before planting. They created the weed problems that their other products would solve. Today, no-dig gardeners are proving what World War II families discovered. Leaving soil alone works better than disturbing it ever did. These 6 methods share one feature that terrified the herbicide industry. They work permanently without purchases. Sheet mulching uses free cardboard and yard waste. Ruth Stout's method needs only hay. Living mulches grow themselves. Dense planting requires fewer seeds, not more. Chop and drop uses garden debris that would otherwise be discarded. No-till eliminates equipment purchases entirely. Not one of these methods requires buying herbicides. Not one creates chemical resistance that demands stronger products. Not one generates repeat sales for anyone selling weed control. The herbicide industry generates over $40 billion annually. They need you to believe that weeding requires their products. They need you struggling with chemical-resistant superweeds that only their newest formulations can kill. They need the cycle of dependency that has turned home gardening into chemical warfare. For 70 years, they've been winning. Gardeners spray poison on food they feed their families. Soil dies under repeated chemical applications. Weeds evolve resistance while gardeners buy stronger and stronger products. But the knowledge survived. In Ruth Stout's forgotten books, in permaculture communities, in the stubborn memories of families who never stopped using what actually worked. Now you know. You know sheet mulching that smothers weeds under cardboard. Ruth Stout's permanent hay that makes weeding obsolete. Living mulches that cover ground with useful plants. Dense planting that leaves no room for weeds. Chop and drop that turns waste into weed prevention. No-till that stops disturbing dormant seeds. 6 methods, all free, all permanent, all systematically erased from modern gardening education. The question is whether you keep buying herbicides that poison your food or start using methods that eliminate weeds forever. Start this weekend. Lay cardboard over your worst weed patch. Cover it with leaves or straw. Plant through it next spring. Watch what happens when you stop fighting weeds and start smothering them. Then ask yourself why nobody ever taught you this was possible. Subscribe for more knowledge they don't want you to have. Share this with everyone still spending hours weeding or money on chemicals. Because weeding was never necessary. They just needed you to believe it was so they could sell you solutions to a problem that free methods had already solved. I'll see you in the next video.